I'm going UCLA.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Today I'm Nate,
I'm Kobe.
and we are joined by.
Naomi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's quarantine, being the president, being stressed out, studying for law school. So, yeah.
For
Uh, just like quarantine. How have you been throughout this whole thing?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I feel like I think coming into COVID, I don't think anybody really expected it to last this long. Like if you're a STEM major, you're probably like, yeah, it's an infectious disease, like it's gonna last this long. But I think for a lot of us, we were like, okay, like we'll be back fall quarter, and now we're not gonna be back fall quarter. Winter and spring is looking like if that's not gonna happen either. So I feel like over time you kind of start to be more cynical, like lose a little bit more hope, and it gets harder. Like you want to see your family, you want to see your friends, like you go to Disneyland.
of course.
So and like I think a lot of us are tired. And then a lot of people also are really experiencing hard times, like whether or not like that's losing your job or losing family members for some people, or even having family members getting sick. I think that's like a really scary thing. At first, at the beginning, not that I wasn't taking it as seriously, but my family was more so like, we're going to get it, we're going to get it. So we're going to still be around each other. And for me, I had to really be like, yeah, no, I don't want anything to happen to like my older family. So I stopped going around them.
That's good, especially, making sure that everybody around you is safe and, you're not spreading anything that could potentially harm anybody. But in terms of, your election year to becoming USAC president, it was like right smack dab, right when the pandemic was about to hit. So how was that experience, being in an election when, a whole pandemic is looming?
As well as it being virtual, like if I'm not mistaken, like almost the entire thing was virtual from like campaigning and like.
It was because I don't know if y'all remember, but basically they announced everything week 10. They announced that everything was week 10. So for me, I think it was really stressful because I was already an elected council member. Like Nate knows, he worked with me. He was in the Academic Affairs Commission.
Shout out.
Shout out. We were doing a lot of great work there, and when the pandemic hit, we basically kind of had to just switch our whole gear to advocating for like more support for students during this like online learning transition period. So we were advocating for things like adjustments to finals. We were advocating for pass no pass grading in the springtime, for just professors to be lenient, like to understand that there's a pandemic, like you're literally living in unprecedented.
It's a deadly virus outside, bro.
Yeah.
Like, relax, relax, bro.
Right. Like, you want me to take this final when? Okay, no, I'm not doing that. Like, asking for so much. So, to also have known that I was running in a really competitive election too. Like, I was running against 4 men. Like, and also me being the only Black woman running, the only Black person running, I think was a lot. And it was tough. A lot of people know that was a really tough election, and it may not have looked like it because our slate really carried ourselves in a way where we were really trying to be graceful in a lot of instances. But, because of the fact that we were also fighting for something like the Cub referendum, I experienced a lot of discrimination. I experienced a lot of sexism and anti-Black racism, and a lot of it came from Reddit, the Reddit platform. Robert, the former president, was really working to try to get a lot of like the nasty comments that were written about myself and him off of the platform for a very long time. So it was toxic. It was incredibly toxic. And if you can imagine going through all that and then just being in your room,
Oh my gosh.
No, that's insane.
Yeah.
So like speaking on the Reddit top, do you want to like briefly go over what that was for like anybody who like wasn't aware?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of these things like were happening, but they were happening in such a closed off hemisphere that's like, okay, oh my gosh, nothing but racism. It's like, oh, it's UCLA. I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, so I mean, it's so complicated, but essentially Reddit is a platform that exists for lots of things. Like there's just discussion boards, but the UCLA subreddit is really popular because, you know, we're funny people. We have like lots of memes on there and like, you know, there's lots of content on there. Like if I wasn't on there, if I wasn't the subject of it for like half of the election season, I probably would have been on there laughing too. Like, you know, sometimes it's jokes, but also sometimes it's really hurtful and cynical because a lot of it is private. And a lot of people are anonymous, so they can literally talk about like whatever they want to talk about, and say whatever they want to talk about, unless the modifiers decide to take it, or the moderators, not the modifiers, decide to take it. So what they were doing, or what folks were doing essentially, were just taking pieces of the USAC election and then kind of putting like a magnifying glass on like certain pieces. So they would even take like our USAC budget. We control $9 million, but a lot of people don't really understand that we don't actually have like a lot of jurisdiction over that $9 million. A lot of it is tied to different parts of the campus. Like John Wooden gets a cut, the John Wooden Center, sorry. The Student Activity Center gets a cut. Like a lot of what we do currently, Bruin Bash gets a cut too. So we actually don't have a lot of say where that money goes. So students are like, where's that $9 million going? And it's like, you know, it's going to different places. Like where I'm not just going out here, like going on like a shopping spree with your student fees. Like I don't have the ability to, you know, Nate has seen it before. Like it's really hard to move money around in student government. And it's really hard to even use that money. So they would take pieces like that and be like, you know, USAC members are being stipended $10,000 a year, and like just the smallest things that you could pick from student government and amplify it. And they did that a lot with Cub. They really tried to push a narrative that it wasn't necessary, that why are we spending $15 on a Black Resource Center? Like, why can't the administration pay for it? Without knowing that, like, folks have been trying to do that work for years. Like, folks have been trying to get administration to pay for it, but haven't. So it's toxic.
Wow. Yeah. So what has, you know, your experience in USAC been up until this point?
You know, I feel like everyone, so like the seniors coming in, I think had a really different experience than we did, like all of us here on this call, because a lot of them were here when the USAC president was Danny Siegel, and he was photographed throwing up the blood sign. And that was like a really big scandal because he was this white boy, like obviously appropriating like Black culture and like gang culture and having no affiliation with any of that. So it was really problematic. And I think coming into USAC, I really thought it was going to be a toxic space. Everybody always talks about like, oh, toxic USAC drama. Like it's so like united. And for me, it wasn't really like that. And I think it was because of the slate that I ran on. I ran with For the People. For those of y'all that don't know, For the People, or the way UCLA works, we have like basically party systems. And For the People is a rather new slate. It's about now 3 years old. And I got to run on that slate. And I think our council last year was very non-conflictual for the better part of the year. Everybody really, even when they didn't get along, understood each other, challenged each other in a way where we're elected officials. We should be challenged. Like, you should be letting me know when my allyship is performative or when I need to be a better student leader or focus on different things. So it wasn't really bad for me. I would say up until elections, like it was exhausting because doing this work is exhausting, but it wasn't completely terrible, I would say, up until elections. And then also just when instances of like racial injustice started becoming really like hyper present on the media. Like we know that Black Lives Matter has been a topic of conversation for years now, but when it kind of blew up here at UCLA and just in general in the world, that was also really hard too, being like the incoming president and then also being a Black woman and having to like lead meetings with UCPD present knowing good and well, like, that they're sitting there gaslighting us. Like, we're trying to tell them, like, you all do this, and they're trying to tell us, like, no, we don't, like, or we're gonna get body cameras and make everything better. Like, so I would say, it has its moments. Like, I would say it has its moments when it's really rewarding, and then it has its other moments where it's really thankless and you're on meeting calls all day.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of touched on just like, like being the only like woman running, as well as being the only Black woman running, because I think being the only Black candidate running like for the election. What would you say are just, I guess, like some of like the external pressures you feel as like where does your identity as like a Black Bruin or like a Black woman or Black mixed race woman, because you're Latinx, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like just like how do all of these identities come together? Like what external pressures do you face as like a student leader, just like with these identities?
Yeah, I mean, I would say sometimes, well, one thing I feel like maybe people wouldn't necessarily always think this, but sometimes I worry, I try to remember that just because I'm Black and Latina doesn't mean that all my energy has to be focused on like Black and Latinx issues. Sometimes I see myself being very well versed in these issues that are of my own struggle, but I'm not as well versed in others. So I think one thing that I've really come to learn is how to listen a lot more and how to try to show up for people a lot more in these different spaces. Because though I'm a Black woman, and I'm not the only person that has a struggle or that has a story when I walk into the room. So I try to be mindful of that. I think the other thing too is like, I also feel like I deal with the pressure of like, I don't know how to really explain this, but people have like expectations of like how I'm supposed to act and how I'm supposed to be. And I don't necessarily like want to play by those rules. Like, I want to be, y'all know, I don't know if y'all like know me very well, but I'm very goofy. I'm very silly. Like, I don't lead my meetings in a very like, I'm banging the gavel at 6:53 p.m. Like,
Oh, you're cool.
Yeah, like I just want to be myself, and I feel like that's really, I try to be very authentic, and I feel like sometimes you kind of do have to code switch. Like, I find myself like reminding myself like, okay, you're going into a meeting with like the chancellor, like you don't have to be like hella like uptight, but you also can't just be like, what's up, Jean? Like
that's very true. That is extremely true.
That would be
so what challenges do you hear from students of color just concerning like the obstacles in their educational journey, and have you faced similar experiences?
Yeah, different students will go through different experiences, and I would say when it comes to students of color, one, we have to remember that like not all students of color and Black and Indigenous students experience things in a monolith. So there are students of color or even Black students who are like who vary in like income levels. Like some are more wealthy or well off than others, and others are struggling to make ends meet. And whichever way or however however you experience your own life, I think the way that you experience school is also dependent on that too. So I hear from some people that that they're working 2 jobs. Like I myself work 2 jobs, so I'm also struggling with like making sure that I'm always good. And for some people, they're struggling to make sure that they always have a meal. Some people, really use the food closet down at PPO, and it's like a lifeline for them. And I would say that folks go through different things. For some students, they have to worry about like their other identity of like being queer and being a Black student, or queer and a Latinx student, being first generation and feeling like you don't belong here. So I hear different stories, whether it's like, I'm working 2 jobs to try to make sure that I can like pay for my housing, or like to make sure I can send home because I'm also supporting my family at home, versus like and racism in class, or like discrimination in class. Like I read a Twitter post of a Black student who said that she was in a group chat in a group meet, and they were just like throwing the N-word around, a bunch of non-Black folks throwing the N-word around. Didn't even notice that she was the only Black person, and when they noticed that they had a Black person, they unsent all the messages. Like those are examples of things that students of color, Black students, that we have to go through, in addition to the obvious barriers that are here already for us. So it varies.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Whew, so, I mean, I guess next we want to figure out, just like, you know, it seems like you have like a lot on your plate, you know, it's just like all these different identities, like, you know, being like, you know, like sometimes like people feel like you're the go-to person, like if you wanted to ask anything about like USAC or like the inner workings of how the school works and things like that. Like, how do you balance that and just like, you know, still taking time for yourself and like, you know, practicing self-care and taking care of your mental health and just making sure like, you know, like Naomi Riley is like good to go, you know?
I wish I was better at that, honestly. And I feel like, you know, I'm not going to sit here on this call and try to act like I have it all together either, because that would be like false. And that also wouldn't be just a good representation. I think this past Tuesday, I was on the council call, and after council, we always stay after, called Good and Welfare. Basically, we like catch up with each other, and we're supposed to talk about like good things that are going on and bad things that are going on. And I started realizing that like Aiden, our EVP, our external vice president, he was like, yeah, I took a nap. And I'm like, I need to like, okay, if you can take a nap and you're the external vice president, I can take a nap too. So you know what? I'm going to take a nap. And like, I need to learn how to say no to more things. And honestly, I want to say no to more of like the things that I'm doing for student government. And I want to say yes to more things that actually make me happy, like, you know, watching Grey's Anatomy, or like painting and sipping, like whatever that means for me. Like, whatever happiness is supposed to mean, I want to learn to do a lot more of that, versus packing my days with like a bunch of things that are exhausting or take too much time. Because a lot of people don't know too, council members get paid technically like $13 an hour, but during the summer, we're only paid $91 a week. So I'm like doing all this work and not being compensated for it, and then also having to do like my second job, and then having to study for the LSAT. So like, though I don't mind this work and I like love to do it, like I ran, so I obviously know that I have to commit to this. But it's an extra burden that we place on students of color, Black students, whenever we like elect them into these spaces and then tell them like, you get paid $10,000, you'll be fine. Like, oh, I'm not fine. Like, now. So I really think saying yes to more things, and also a lot of people know I don't reply very fast either, and I wish I was better with that, but I think that is something that kind of shields me too from being overworked. Like I get an ungodly amount of messages a day.
I feel that.
I could imagine.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna cap, bro. Sometimes I'll be thinking like, you know what? She's probably busy. I'm gonna let her.
No, you should still text me. The other day, Jean was like, "Are you still a peer counselor?" I'm like, Jean, like, no.
The president, Jean.
But I still responded anyways, like, so.
That's cool. That's cool.
I want to like have. I want to be a better friend to people too, you know?
That's dope. That's really dope.
So, you know, being USAC president, what are some of your favorite things about that position?
It's on the positive side, you know. I feel like we've talked about a lot of negative, you know.
Yeah, you know, I want to get into you know, some of the good things about the presidency.
Can't be all bad. I hope.
I pray.
I get a gavel.
Wait, bro?
Yeah, I get like a gavel, like, you know, like in the courtroom. But I would say the people, like,
okay.
the people that I've met are for sure, like, hands down, my favorite part of being in USAC. Even, like, you know, Nate and I go way back. Like, Nate and I are literally day one. So a lot of people
Bro,
don't know.
like, this is my first ever, like, room neighbor. Yeah, like.
In college, like, in FSP, we were across the door.
No, like, right next door. Like, yeah, like, I used to be playing.
Yeah, you're right.
I was playing The Weeknd at, like, full blast. You come in, like, who played that? And I'm over here just like, what's up?
I was like, really? I remember telling my mom, like, I have some loud ass neighbors.
Bro, playing The Weeknd at 100. It's the first
no,
day.
like SZA, bro. Like, you really just going crazy.
Oh, was that right when Control dropped, huh?
Right when Control dropped.
Okay,
bro.
now you get a pass. You get a pass.
You feel me?
Yeah.
We all got a pass that year. It was a good summer for music. But I say that to say, like, you know, wait, what was the question?
Oh, favorite perks about being in USAC president. Yeah.
So, like, I use Nate as an example because, like, I had the opportunity to get closer to Nate and to see him, like, in a different light through the Academic Affairs Commission. And I really got to, like, learn my different office. And then even apart from, like, the office, like, I get to sit on council with these 15 different people, 14 different people. And you spend a lot of time with each other. Council goes through a lot, too. Like, there are weeks when we have people coming in and yelling at us, you know, for whatever reason, for whatever's going on campus. And we take a lot of that. So because we go through different things and no one really understands what it's like to be an elected official beyond those 14 other people that are there, you kind of build a bond. And those bonds to me have been, like, they've been truly some of my best friendships that I've got in college. Like, whether it be, like, me and Kalechi, like, Kalechi and I still really talk. She's amazing, like, and she's hilarious. Like, we just, the way that we've been able to interact with each other. I can tell y'all, like, one story, but basically, when Kobe died, that was really impactful for me. Growing up, Kobe was my idol. He was someone that was an inspiration to me. Even after he, like, retired, he was still an inspiration to me. So when he died, it was a lot. And I remember the other council members didn't necessarily understand beyond Kalechi, Lalo, and Kim, which are my slate mates. So I remember, like, we had a council meeting, and I was not going to sit through, like, a council meeting when I was mourning the loss of, like, a celebrity, which is really weird. Like, if y'all mourn the loss of a celebrity, like, it's really weird because you didn't know them, but they had such an impact on you. So it's really sad. So I remember we just, like, left the council meeting and we went to the Staples Center. And, like, I just remember that night being so impactful for me. I got to see, like, I got to collectively mourn with the city of Los Angeles, with everybody that was down there. And those are the moments that, like, I think student government for. Like, you know, even though it runs me dry and it's tiring, the people that you meet are so inspiring. And they care so much about the communities that they come from.
That is
wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I guess next we want to talk about just, like, what is your experience, like, you know, working with administration, and it's like, you know, working with all these, like, older individuals that, you know, might not be, like, directly connected to, like, the experience that we go through as, like, you know, younger students, and, like, just, like, tell me about, like the dynamics of that relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, you would think they were young at one point, and, like, you would imagine that they would understand certain things that we do, or, like, why we do certain things, or, like, you would understand that certain ideas aren't, like, good. So, for example, during this COVID-19 pandemic, I've really been trying to like, let them know, like, students want to gather. So, like, it's not a good idea to have people in triples. It's not even a good idea to have people in doubles because, you know, students want to be around each other to the point where, you know, and also the virus isn't affecting us in a way where we're seeing the fatal outcomes unless we are immunocompromised or unless we have folks at home that are immunocompromised. So you see a lot of students not taking it seriously. And I'm guilty of this at times too. Even though I wear my mask everywhere I go, I'm still going out from time to time, whether it's like going to the beach or whatnot. And that's an important thing that I really try to communicate to administration, that they have to like understand student behaviors, but also still give students the agency to be able to care about community. So it's really weird. I think you get like with administration, it's also hard too, because you really try to like remain somewhat professional, but also being like really real. And then I also struggle too in the sense where I'll disagree with an administrator. Like, for example, Vice Chancellor Monroe Gordon, like, we've disagreed on, I would say, topics relating to the Community Programs Office or CPO, or even just like the Black Resource Center or CUB. And it's hard because even though you disagree with them, you still kind of have to sit in those meetings and kind of work through those disagreements. And I would say, whenever you disagree with an administrator, I never fault anyone for how they want to take out their frustrations or anger. But I've always just tried to remember that, they're a person on the other side too. And I would want them to treat me the same. So that's how I go about things. But, if students want to yell and scream, I applaud that too. However you want to express your anger, that's valid. So it's hard, I would say, communicating with administration, because there's also such a barrier sometimes, especially when we talk about like issues of police brutality. Like, some administrators don't see the things that we see or aren't in the classes that we're in. They're not being, I don't know if they're just not radical or what's wrong with them, but they just don't see it in the way that we do. So it's really hard when I'm trying to communicate experiences of Black students, of students of color, and I'm being told that that's not the case. Being gaslit is something that's really common when you're sitting there in like a meeting. You start to think like, well, am I crazy, or like, am I being like an angry Black woman? Like, it's a very complex experience, I would say.
Okay. I mean, I guess just touching up on that, you said like you have to sit there. Sometimes you guys will be in disagreements, and it's like, I guess like when people hear the term like USAC president, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like Obama but like at UCLA. But it's like what, I guess, like where does the reach of your authority go? Like, what can you do? I guess just to clarify, what can you change, or what can you do as USAC president?
Yeah. So it's so funny because I remember when I first came to UCLA and Div is the former academic commissioner. He wanted me to run. Cool. Yeah, Div's really
cool. Div cool.
I love Div. But Div wanted me to run for president. And I'm like, what do they even do? Like, why would I want to do that? Like, I like being the academic affairs commissioner because we can advocate for policy. We can literally add new educational programs. Like, we can do so much. Like, what can the president do? And it's interesting because, in terms of tangible, I can press the button. You know how you grew up thinking the president can press the button and it'll explode the country. We can do that. We definitely can do that. But we can sit in meetings, and a lot of the time administration sees me as the voice of students. So throughout this pandemic, I'm the only student that's allowed to sit on the future planning task force. I mean, there's the grad student rep, and I can invite students, but in terms of membership, they only extended the membership to me. And I think it's because, we talk about a lot of sometimes confidential information. It's a lot of strategizing, and they can't just have all students there represented. But that's where it's on me to go into communities and understand community conditions. So that way, when they're saying oh, we're going to make everyone be in doubles, no, you're not, because we have immunocompromised students that cannot be in doubles. So I would say in terms of when it comes to like tight situations or emergency situations, they often come to the USAC president, which we're still trying to change. Like, I don't believe that that's how it should be. I really believe that they should go to more students, or more students' voices should be guaranteed at the table. Like, maybe you can go to the president, but the president should always have a mechanism to talk to students, which hasn't really been the case in the past. But yeah, I think the other thing that we do too, we make a lot of appointments. I want to say I make over 50 appointments to different committees, I think. I don't know. My appointments director like helps me out on that a lot. But we basically direct students to different areas, and a lot of power is held in those different areas, whether it's like funding power or being able to give input on different things or different topics. So it depends on what you think like power is, and that's why I always say like it's not a powerful position. It's really a position of service. Like, you are going to be serving almost everyone but yourself. Sometimes yourself. I'm kidding. You'll but it's more of a position of service rather than it is like press the button or like tell Gene Block what to do, because these people have their own minds, like you're even sometimes having to be like a politician and trying to play things in a certain way. Like, for example, the Black Resource Center, I think, like is an important example to look at, because students had advocated for this for years, for 5 years counting, right? But it wasn't until this moment, in this important moment in our history, where like things kind of erupted, that they were like, okay, like we'll finally like find a donor to like pay for it. Like, no, y'all had the money all along, in my opinion.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, but you decided not to until this moment in time, and because there was political, they call it like political will. Because there's political will, now let's do this thing. So sometimes, as president, you have to leverage certain things. Like, they wouldn't have allowed students at the table originally, but because of something like a Getty fire, you have to capitalize on that. Thankfully, no lives were lost in something like a Getty fire. Whereas like in these other situations, it's just terrible that that's what it takes, lives lost, in order for change to happen.
Wow. And that's very just deep, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand the role of the USAC president. Like Nate said, they think that the USAC president has the nuclear codes and things like that, but they are a person and a student just like the rest of us, and they deserve that same respect. So, for a lot of students that are going to be returning back in, fall, winter, and spring, what is campus going to look like for them?
Yeah. Whew, that's sad. It's a sad question, because
oh gosh, no.
Damn, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm very sorry.
We're like, damn. I mean, like, y'all know what like campus is like usually. Like, it's parties, it's fun, it's undie runs, it's like maybe the Roebling block party. Like, do you go to that? I've never.
No,
oh yeah, that's like a Travis Scott. That's like a Travis Scott rager at the Roebling block party.
Roebling block party, never heard of that.
Look at Nate. I've only been there a couple times, huh?
That's hilarious. We were at our retreat when it happened.
Bro, I'm so mad.
Y'all missed it was damn
Bro,
near
Mo Bamba was
huge
playing,
fire, yeah.
Like a SWAT team just pulling out riot shields. I'm like, wow.
I've never seen students try to set themselves on fire more than a Roebling block party.
That was crazy. I don't even think I would have been there. Like, but those are experiences that like students, I hope they're not going to get this year. Like, I hope people aren't going to be at the Roebling block party unless everybody has masks and is social distancing. Like,
6 feet apart, just burning stuff.
Light it up. Okay. But, I would say certain aspects of campus life you're not going to get anymore, unfortunately. Like, you're not going to be able to sit at a dining hall and just be there until it closes with like all of your friends, or you're not going to be able to do that like during like Covell brunch. Covell brunch is iconic. Like, Covell brunch
That was, yeah, bro.
Yeah, Covell, them pancakes, man. Woo!
French toast.
The omelets.
French toast.
And they just redid Covell, didn't they?
Oh, so beautiful. Like,
I've never even seen it. I haven't seen it yet.
It's really nice.
Wow.
My favorite part was honestly seeing like all the Black people, like,
it's like, it's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Like, you just come back from like a night of just, extracurricular activities, and
extracurricular, hard studying. There's so much studying.
Crack of dawn, and you just walk into PJ, you see everybody, you just sit in the line. It's a rite of passage. It's a rite of passage.
And you just know you're at home too. Like certain aspects, like living on the Black floor, like is something that's so like a rite of passage for different students. And we're talking about this like as Black students. Every other student gets this as their own in their own community too. So it's really sad that we're not going to be able to get a lot of that. But I try to see the silver lining, and it's really hard to see the silver lining, like for first years. I think when we think about like first year, especially in terms of retention, it's a really critical year for students. If your first year will determine a lot of like how you do in the rest of your 4 years here at UCLA. Even for seniors, like it's really sad too. Like all of our last somethings are like kind of just gone and taken away, and hopefully it's back to normal or somewhat normal by the time we are able to graduate. But it's really sad. And then I think it's also sad for the folks in the middle too, especially one, because like a lot of second years didn't get offered housing, but two, also because you get to make so many bonds with like the fourth years and the first years, and it's sad. And I would say this is the moment where we can try to take advantage of being online and still try to form community, even though Zoom is like so anti like community like building.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happens, but maybe this is like where we bond through Twitter, or like bond through Instagram. I don't know what it looks like, and I wish I could tell y'all what it would look like, but mostly everything's going to be somewhat closed, or we're expecting to be somewhat closed. Dining halls really aren't going to be open for like sitting down and gathering in large settings.
I guess like to reassure some of the students, because a lot of students are just like very confused. It's a very confusing time in everybody's life. No one really knows what to expect. Every day the news brings out some new story, and you don't know if it's fear mongering or if it's actually a safety concern. So I guess like, what can you speak about how UCLA's like handle this in terms of like reopening as safely as possible?
I think I would hope. I mean, I'm sitting in these committees and I'm thinking as critically as possible of like things that can go wrong. I'm bringing it back to different students, getting input, the advisors that I have in my office. I've created mini task force of my own to kind of hear what students are saying and relay it back. And I would say in some areas, UCLA is being very proactive and trying to keep students as safe as possible. And I think in other areas, it's failing. And that can be for us to analyze why it's failing. And I'll use like one example of the athletes, for example. The athletes were probably the first group of students to come back. And to me, that's a red flag when the first season that's coming back is football, and majority of the team happens to be Black and majority of the coaches happen to be white. So I feel like that says something when, I feel like it sends a message to the athletes on the team. And if y'all were following, they actually joined together and I think had signed a letter. I'm forgetting, and I don't want to like misquote the situation, but they had signed a letter, and an article was written in the LA Times about Elijah Wade, our general representative. Getting all the athletes together to be like, if y'all want to bring us back, you need more safety precautions in place. Like, we want to make sure we know when someone on our team tests positive, or we want to know when we're exposed, or all these other things. So I would say in some aspects, like when it comes to not making students be in doubles, they're doing good. But, when we think about like our athletes testing positive for COVID-19, and we don't know those numbers. I haven't seen those numbers widely publicized, and I think that would be like my area of concern.
That's really crazy because I know I think it's like about a day or 2 days ago, USC just released that like 40 of their like frat row students tested positive.
Yeah.
Out of like a random outbreak, and it's summer, so it's like it's not as like condensed, and like it's not like a big populated area much as so like the school year. So like what's to say like when we get to the school year we won't have just like random outbreaks, and if we do, like what will we do? Like is there a policy in place for like if an outbreak does happen?
Yeah, and that's what the task force is looking at. If there is a major outbreak like that, there are going to be ramped down measures put in place. It's still too early to discuss the like actual numbers that are put in place, if there even are numbers. I've had the opportunity to work with like different infectious disease control specialists, and especially one that's primarily guiding us on the task force. And one thing that he reiterates is that this isn't just like a fixed number situation. Like it isn't like, okay, 3 people, there's an outbreak, so we're shutting everything down. It's kind of like there's so much that goes into it. There's like the context of the area, like how many cases are, what's happening like locally in LA County, what are the policies that are in place right now.
I'm going UCLA.
Yeah. I would say thank you for having me. I really like what y'all are doing, and I really hope that this was informative for some people. I'm just going to give my office like a shout out. If you haven't followed yet, you should be following UCLA President. Whenever anything major happens, we're always trying to report it, let y'all know what's going on. But the other thing too is, if you're interested at all in getting involved, we'll be having opportunities to get involved too. I would say, student government isn't for everyone, but I would say there's a place for everyone in student government. So if it kind of makes your heart sing, I would say come to the dark side. I'm kidding. It's not the dark. I would say come try it out. Great things can happen, possibly.
Cool. Oh, we just want to say thank you. Very good friend of mine, like one of my first ever neighbor at UCLA. Number one. And like I know a lot of people think very highly of you. Like, we see you active and like communicating like for all communities, standing up for all people, just really being like the true definition of an advocate. That showing all the true and value. So you just want to say thank you. And if you have any things you want to say to like, like the people of UCLA, people anywhere, like, just other students in general, like the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So
should I say something like
you want to, like the floor is yours. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, just wanted to let y'all know I'm always here for you. Students always find a way to use me in different ways. And if you ever find yourself like in a bind, or you have like a specific university policy related question or anything, I'm here for that. If you have a cool idea and you're like, hey, I want to see your office do this, or I want to see USAC or just UCLA do this, let me know. We're always trying to make this place better than how we found it. So I'm here for y'all. If you even just want advice, like you want to join student government, but you don't know what that would be like for you, I can talk about that too. And we can talk about that together. So thank y'all. And I really hope that I can continue to serve y'all in the best way possible this upcoming year. It's going to be a challenge, but I think if we stick in it together, we can come out on top. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, you guys know, thank you for tuning into Office Hours. I'm Nate, and the voice of Kobe. Wow. But well, thank you once again for having us. And I'm gonna end the recording.
Yeah, cool.